Let's now look at the thyroid gland. I'll remind you that the thyroid gland is located in your neck. It's a fairly large gland. It's somewhat butterfly shaped with a couple lobes on each side of your trachea. And it's located just below your larynx or voice box. Buried within the thyroid gland are four small parathyroid glands, which we will discuss next. The thyroid gland produces two different groups of hormones. What we collectively call the thyroid hormones are T3 and T4. But it also produces another hormone called calcitonin. You'll notice that this drawing is not a drawing of the thyroid gland, but a structure within the thyroid gland called a thyroid follicle. Follicle is a container. This happens to be a little structure that contains precursor molecules used to produce the thyroid hormones T3 and T4. You'll notice that in this drawing, they are pointing to cells of the follicle called follicular cells. These are the cells that produce T3 and T4, whereas cells located outside of the follicle, called parafollicular cells, produce the hormone calcitonin. Let's look at T3 and T4. The home run is that these two hormones collectively regulate your basal metabolic rate. They do this by boosting metabolism. The definition of metabolism are all these cellular enzymatic reactions that produce energy and use energy. In order to boost basal metabolic rate, these hormones help stimulate the synthesis of proteins, like enzymes. They increase the use of glucose and fatty acids for energy production, ATP synthesis. They increase the breakdown of fat for the release of the fatty acids for energy. They enhance cholesterol excretion, they accelerate body growth, and they contribute to development of the nervous system. So a lot of vital functions, especially early in life, revolve around thyroid hormones. But again, for us, the major function is to increase metabolism. Individuals can overproduce thyroid hormones and have a high metabolic rate. We call that hyperthyroidism. And then individuals may have a low thyroid production called hypothyroidism. As an aside, thyroid hormones also increase heart rate. That can be an indication of high or low thyroid hormones. For instance, if an individual has bradycardia, which is a slow heart rate, that could indicate hypothyroidism. Let's look at calcitonin. Calcitonin is completely different. It revolves around regulation of calcium levels. In fact, this hormone is secreted and stimulated when there is too much calcium in the bloodstream. When calcium levels are too high, this hormone is going to help lower blood calcium levels, also phosphate levels. It does this by inhibiting bone resorption by osteoclasts. If you recall, bone resorption by osteoclasts is when these cells break down bone matrix and release calcium into the blood. Well, obviously you don't want to do that when you have high calcium levels in the blood. And this hormone will also help accelerate uptake of calcium and phosphates into the bone matrix. So it's a way we can store a little bit of this excess calcium into the bones. Your body will also excrete calcium into urine if it has high levels in the bloodstream. So those are the three hormones produced by the thyroid gland, T3 and T4, which are in essence the same. They function very similarly. And then calcitonin. Parathyroid glands, located within the thyroid, produce one hormone, So it's known as parathyroid hormone. The cells that produce this hormone are different. They're called chief cells. This hormone is antagonistic to calcitonin. What that means is it ultimately does the opposite of calcitonin. So if calcitonin helps to lower calcium levels in the blood when it gets too high, it would make sense that parathyroid hormone is going to help raise calcium levels if it's too low. So the stimulus is low blood calcium levels. The action is to increase calcium levels, also magnesium, and decrease phosphate levels. It does this by three important mechanisms shown in the box. Increases bone resorption by osteoclasts. So now we will stimulate these osteoclasts to break down bone matrix, releasing calcium into the bloodstream. The second function is to tell the kidneys to retain or reabsorb calcium, so keep calcium in the blood as opposed to excreting it in urine. And then three, it promotes the formation of calcitriol, which is the body's active form of vitamin D. And what vitamin D does is it helps to increase the intestine's ability to absorb dietary calcium. So if you have low blood calcium, you want to get as much as you possibly can from your diet. And that's what vitamin D does. This looks like a fairly complicated figure, but it really can be simplified. What this does is it revolves around calcium homeostasis. And it's using the two antagonistic hormones, parathyroid and calcitonin. So you can go through this figure on your own and go step by step, from step 1 all the way to step 6, and understand how the body is maintaining the appropriate levels of calcium in your bloodstream. If calcium levels get too high, calcitonin helps bring it down. If calcium levels are too low, parathyroid hormone helps to increase calcium. Collectively, they are used to maintain the correct amount of calcium in your bloodstream.